All right, everybody, welcome into the alley oop. I had an interesting topic that I wanted to go over today, and I think it bears a lot of fruit. Recording this on Monday nights, obviously, you're seeing this on Wednesday morning. If you're watching the YouTube video, if you're on the audio feed, thank you. Make sure to go subscribe to that. And this comes out as a podcast if you're only listening on the YouTube. So make sure to go follow both if you're interested. I wanted to talk about small markets. I wanted to talk about, and that's kind of the premise in general of this podcast, right? This is the alley oop. This is where I cover 30 teams equitably. And the goal of it is not to focus on the large markets just because those are going to get clicks. The goal is to focus on the teams that matter, and every team matters, if we're being honest. Some teams have gone through lulls, some teams have gone through bad points. But I think that these three teams have really risen through the ashes over the course of these last couple of years and are now finding reasons to be playable again, reasons to be excitable, reasons to be fun, and for people to care. I wanted to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves, the OKC Thunder, and the Orlando Magic. Those three teams, if you're checking the standings lately, they're at the top of the standings. It's been really, really cool to see. Boston is at the top of the East at 13-4. But Orlando is tied with Milwaukee and Philly as of Monday night at 12-5. They're great. In the West, Minnesota is leading the Western Conference at 12-4, while OKC is at 11-5. Denver is at 12-6. Denver also kind of a small mid-market, if you will. And by the way, Minnesota's 12-4. So it has been a big deal for these teams to get back on top, for these teams to get back on track in general, because for a lot of these franchises, the droughts can be long, the droughts can be heavy, the droughts can be poor, and these fans, they stick with their teams through thick and thin, and you know that they've been through some really tough times. Orlando in particular has been through a really, really tough time over the course of this last decade or so, so it's awesome to see them sort of recover and have a moment here. But why are they having their moments all at the same time? Why are these moments happening right now? Kind of interesting, right? Why are these teams good? What happened to Denver? What happened to Milwaukee? What happened to Boston? What happened to all these other teams? The Lakers, the Warriors, the Clippers, the Nets, like the Knicks, all these teams where the NBA tells you and media will tell you which teams matter. They don't care about Minnesota, OKC, and Orlando. But suddenly, you give those teams time, you give those teams resources, and you even out the playing field just a little bit, and suddenly you start to see these teams really start to grow. I want to point out a couple things. All these teams, like I said, they've had long, arduous stretches of mediocrity or just plain bad play. And they're all recovering now, and they're all at the top of the league. What binds them together? Why are they doing so well at the same time? Let's start with Minnesota. 2020 NBA draft, they draft Anthony Edwards first overall. They already had Karl Anthony Towns. He hasn't worked out as the face of their franchise. They needed somebody that they could turn that over to. And they found the perfect guy in Ant. He makes so much sense. He's charismatic. He is dynamic. He is talented. And there are memes going around of him being compared to Michael Jordan. Pretty good player to be compared to, if I'm being honest. So it has been really cool to see Anthony Edwards step up and grow into that role. But it hasn't just been him. They've had other guys. They traded for Rudy Gobert, and while it looked like a bad trade at the time, now Minnesota is third in defensive rating. I think they're 12th in offensive rating as of recording this on Monday night. And this is via Cleaning the Glass, by the way. And those teams seem to have an identity now. They're playing with defense. They're playing with athleticism. They're playing around Anthony Edwards' strengths and have made it so they can feature him in the ways that he can be featured and be the best version of himself that he can be. Now, OKC. 2022 NBA draft, they select Chet Holmgren, second overall. He doesn't play at all in his rookie season. This year, 2023-24, is basically his rookie year. But he has still played great because he is in an ecosystem where they can feature him, where they can put him into positions to succeed. And while they already have Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, they already have a bunch of playmakers around Chet. He is the guy in the middle of their team that all they needed was a center. And lo and behold, here's a 7'2" guy, a modern center in the modern NBA who may not be able to deal with the Jokic's and the Embiids of the world, but can deal with pretty much everybody else and is playing great basketball. He's been fantastic to begin this year, probably the rookie of the year. OKC is 6th in offensive rating, 6th in defensive rating. They have built this thing up over a long time. They committed to defense and were great as soon as last year, despite the fact that they didn't have the personnel to do it. Now they do have the personnel to do it, and Chet Holmgren has become one of the best rim protectors in the league, rivaling guys like Rudy Gobert and Anthony Davis and Jaren Jackson and players like that. It's been really cool to see. And then you have Orlando. 2022 NBA draft, just like OKC, they surprised everybody and select Paolo Banchero first overall. Paolo was a shocker. Most people thought Jabari Smith was going to go there. Maybe Chet Holmgren would go there. They decided to go with Paolo. And he has kind of a tough end to his rookie season. People questioning what kind of role he's going to play. Is he going to be more of a Carmelo Anthony type? Or can he develop into that Giannis, Tatum, LeBron James kind of type? And he's looking like the latter. He's looking really good. He has played along with Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs, and even guys like Goga Bitadze and Cole Anthony and Mo Wagner, Franz Wagner's older brother. They have played great basketball, and they are another team that is clearly in on their own identity. They are 2nd in defensive rating, have committed to their system, have committed to building around their young guys in the best way that they possibly can. And those guys have paid it off. Franz and Paolo are one of the best young forward duos in the league. Not just young forward duos, young duos in general. They're going to be fantastic for a long, long time. Just as Anthony Edwards is in Minnesota, just as Shea and Chet are going to be in OKC. And it's clear that between all three of those teams, patience has been a thing, identity has been a thing, drafting well has been a thing, and habits have been a great thing. That's what I'm going to call the small market formula. That's what I'm going to call building your own version of the Denver Nuggets, a team that I cover. You see them right in the background there. The Denver Nuggets had Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, who some people remember. They drafted Monte Morris. They drafted Michael Porter. They drafted a whole bunch of talented players, turned that into a championship core over plenty of time, gave themselves a long runway, made the right moves, built great habits, figured out how to play defense, and made it work. Same with the Milwaukee Bucks, who won a championship back in 2021 around Giannis Antetokounmpo. Added Chris Middleton, traded for Drew Holiday, added Brook Lopez, committed to a system, built around Giannis in the best way that they could, and figured out how to make it work. They took their time. They were patient. They didn't react at the first sign of trouble. They worked through the kinks, and they gave their players plenty of opportunities to develop, plenty of opportunities to succeed. As long as those players kept paying off those promises, that was always going to be a good thing. That was always going to be something that these small market teams could abide by. If they went about the process correctly in Milwaukee and Denver, they were always going to be okay. And to me, that is what a small market formula looks like. You have to come up with your identity. What do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be a great defensive team? Do you want to be a great offensive team? Do you want to be a team that runs? Do you want to be a team that plays slow? It doesn't really matter what you choose ultimately. Building a great defense is a great place to start, and then trusting your stars to make star shots, that's a good idea. That's a great place to start, and that's actually where these three teams I'm talking about, Minnesota, OKC, Orlando, that's where they've buttered their own bread. Minnesota this year, 3rd in defensive rating. OKC, 6th in defensive rating. Orlando, 2nd in defensive rating. Another team I haven't talked about, Houston, 1st in defensive rating this year, a young team that added some veterans, but is still built around a lot of young guys. They're playing great too. Now, they're not a small market, they have different circumstances, in my opinion, but they're still doing the same stuff. So it's been really cool to see from a lot of these teams that have been bad for a while. These teams figured some stuff out. They've been patient. They've been willing to go through the process. They have gone about things the right way. And it's been cool to see. This is the new era of the NBA in a bunch of different ways, in my opinion. Identity, draft well. You have to hit on your picks. And in order to hit on your picks, you have to have patience. You can't just expect those guys to be great up front. You have to be willing to wait. You have to be willing to give them time. And if you don't give them time, then they're going to fail. They're going to bust, or they're going to have too much pressure and leave, which is what a lot of guys do. And then the fourth one, build great habits. Because if you don't, then you get into certain situations where a rebuild might take a little bit longer than you hope, might take a little bit longer than expected. And maybe guys don't learn the lessons that they need to learn early in their careers in order to be the best possible players to help win basketball games. You got to win, but you got to do it the right way. You can't sell your soul. You have to play hard and you have to win the right way. I think the Nuggets and the Bucks are a great example of how that works. And I do think that the modern CBA now, with this second apron, this luxury tax, this super tax that is coming through that's really penalizing the teams that are going to spend a bunch of money, this is leveling the playing field in ways that we've never seen before. There are going to be teams that are still willing to pay that super tax. There's still going to be teams that are willing to kind of sell out. They'll trade out all their assets in order to make sure that they max their current window. But I think the teams that are still building along with the process are going to be rewarded here. They're going to be rewarded with at least 3 to 4 year runways where they have time before their teams get too expensive to make life great for themselves. But you have to hit the right moment. You have to wait. You have to be patient. OKC has been patient, but they are one of those teams, in my opinion. Them, Minnesota now getting expensive with Jaden McDaniels, his contract extension. And then Orlando, they're going to have to build the right team around Paolo and Franz. They've got the longest runway of the three, but I do think that their time is going to be interesting to see. Who else do they commit to? Is it Jalen Suggs? Is it Cole Anthony? Is it one of these other guards? Markelle Fultz, maybe. Who knows? Who knows what they're ultimately going to do? I'm very curious to see how it breaks down. But what I know is that the patient teams are generally the best run. They're generally the teams with the longest vision. And they're definitely the teams that feel like they're holding the ace in the hole. That they've got an ace up their sleeve, basically. They know that their guys are the most talented. Because in the end, talent still wins. Giannis and Jokic, they're still the most talented players of this generation. And that's one of the reasons why Milwaukee and Denver were able to remain as patient as they were. But I do think that if there's this new generation with SGA, with John Morant in Memphis, if he can get his head back on straight, with Anthony Edwards now, many people wanting him to be the face of the NBA. Maybe it's Shea and Chet in OKC. Maybe Orlando. Maybe they could lure a third star there. And suddenly you've got a big three with Paolo, Franz, and a third star. Hello, Donovan Mitchell. Maybe it's a little bit different than that. So I'm curious to see what it looks like over the course of these next few years. I'm curious to see whether these teams can keep up their hot starts. It's only 20% of the way through the season. You'd never want to overreact in these situations. But I think that this is just more of a sign of things that are going to come. Sign of things that are maybe already here, sooner than we expected. OKC, Orlando, Minnesota. Teams that maybe people didn't think would be at the top of the standings, but we've got to reevaluate. There's a changing of the guard in the NBA. LeBron, Steph, KD, guys like that, they're not always going to be at the top of the standings anymore. You've got a new generation now. And I think this is a great example of that. So we'll see if these teams can really push forward. We'll see if these teams can hold their salt and hold at the top of the standings. I'm curious to see what happens. But for now, make sure to like and subscribe down below to the YouTube video. If you're listening on the audio side, make sure to like and follow the channel over there as well. Really appreciate all the support on the alley oop over the course of these last few weeks. Make sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button, wherever you get podcasts.